I want to start with something I hear in the comments of this channel more than almost anything else. Somebody bought a brand new rig, sometimes spent their whole retirement savings on it, and within the first year, sometimes within the first month, they're dealing with leaks, with cabinets falling apart, with slide-outs that won't seat right, and they end up writing me some version of the same sentence. It's junk. I bought a brand new RV and it's junk. I hear it from folks who did everything right, saved for years, researched their options, walked the lot and picked out something that felt solid under their feet. And within weeks, sometimes days, that feeling of solid quality turns out to have been nothing more than fresh paint and good lighting on the showroom floor. And I genuinely want to tell you today, as somebody who's been around this industry a long time, that sentence is a lot more true than the manufacturers want you to believe, and I think you deserve to understand exactly why. Because it isn't bad luck, and it isn't you doing something wrong. There's a real reason a whole lot of brand new rigs are falling apart faster than they ever used to, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And more importantly, exactly what you can do to protect yourself, whether you're shopping for your first rig or you're already dealing with problems on one you bought not too long ago. Let's start with where this all comes from, because none of this happened by accident. Back during the RV boom of 2020 and 2021, when everybody in the country suddenly wanted an RV at the same time, manufacturers were sitting on order books longer than they'd ever seen before. Dealers were begging for inventory. Waitlists stretched for months, and every plant in Elkhart, Indiana, which is where the vast majority of RVs in this country get built, was running flat out trying to keep up with demand that had come out of nowhere and didn't look like it was slowing down anytime soon. Here's the problem with that kind of sudden explosion in demand. Building a well-made RV takes skilled labor, and skilled labor takes years to develop, not weeks or months. No matter how badly a plant manager needs bodies on the line to keep up with an order book that keeps growing by the day. You don't turn a fresh hire into somebody who can properly seal a roof seam, align a slide-out mechanism, or run clean, safe wiring through a wall cavity in a couple weeks of training. But that's exactly what these plants had to do during the boom. They hired as fast as they possibly could, trained folks as quick as they could get away with, and pushed those new hires onto the line, because the alternative was falling further behind on orders that were already backed up for months. Experienced hands who'd been building these rigs for years suddenly found themselves training 3 or 4 new people at once, trying to teach years of hard-won skill in a fraction of the time it actually takes to learn it properly. On top of that, quality control itself got squeezed. In a normal year, a rig might get a real thorough inspection before it ever leaves the plant, checking every system, every seal, every seam, sometimes taking the better part of an hour to work through a proper checklist. During the boom, with units needing to roll out the door as fast as possible to keep up with demand, that inspection process got compressed. Sometimes down to what old-timers in the business started calling a windshield inspection, meaning somebody walks around the outside, glances through the window, and signs off without ever really testing the systems the way they should have been tested. I've talked to more than one former plant worker over the years who told me flat out that quality checks that used to take a full hour got cut down to 15 or 20 minutes during the worst of the rush, just to keep the line moving and keep up with the orders piling in faster than anybody could reasonably handle. Now, here's where it gets worse for you as the buyer. A lot of those rigs built during that rushed period, with undertrained labor and compressed quality checks, are the exact same rigs that have been quietly working their way through dealer inventory and into driveways across this country over the past several years. Manufacturers don't slap a big warning label on a unit that was built during a rush period. It looks the same on the lot as one built with all the time and care in the world. You can't tell the difference standing there admiring the countertops and the fresh paint. The only way that rushed construction shows itself is later, once you're actually living in it, actually driving it down real roads, actually putting real stress on those seams and seals and connections that got a shortcut inspection instead of a proper one. Let's talk about what that shows up as, because I want you to know exactly what to watch for, whether you're already dealing with it or trying to avoid it on your next purchase. Water intrusion is probably the biggest one, and it's the one that does the most expensive, most heartbreaking damage. A roof seam that wasn't sealed quite right, a window that wasn't caulked properly, a slide out that doesn't seat tight enough to keep rain out when it's retracted. Any one of these can let water creep into the walls and floor of your rig without you ever seeing a drop of it right away. By the time you notice a soft spot in the floor, or a musty smell that won't go away, or delamination where the exterior siding starts bubbling and separating from the wall underneath it, that water's often been working its damage for months, sometimes longer. And by then you're looking at a repair that can run into the thousands of dollars, sometimes enough thousands that the rig's barely worth fixing at all. What makes this particular problem so insidious is that it's almost entirely invisible until it isn't. You can own a rig for a full season, maybe two, genuinely happy with your purchase, with water quietly working its way through a seam that was never sealed right from day one, and have no idea anything's wrong until the damage has already become serious enough to notice on its own. Slide-out problems are another big one. These mechanisms have to extend and retract cleanly, seal tight against the weather when they're out, and do it over and over again for years without binding up or leaking, all while supporting real weight and dealing with constant vibration every time the rig goes down the road. When a slide's installed even a little bit out of alignment, which happens easier than you'd think when a rushed crew is working against the clock trying to hit a daily production quota, you end up with a slide that grinds, that doesn't seal properly, or that eventually stops moving smooth at all. And a slide-out repair isn't a cheap fix. You're often looking at a shop pulling major components apart to get at the mechanism, which means real labor hours on top of whatever parts need replacing, sometimes stretching into a repair bill that rivals what you'd pay for a serious engine problem on the tow vehicle itself. Then there's the stuff that's more annoying than dangerous, but still tells you everything about how that rig was actually built. Cabinet doors that don't hang square, drawers that stick or won't close all the way, trim pieces that were nailed on crooked and never got straightened out before the rig left the plant, countertops with visible seams that weren't fitted right. None of these individually is going to ruin your trip, but taken together, they're a pattern. And that pattern tells you the crew building that particular rig was moving fast and wasn't given the time to do the small things right, which makes you wonder what corners got cut in the places you can't see, the wiring behind the walls, the plumbing connections under the floor, the places where a rushed job doesn't show itself until something actually fails. Electrical issues round out the list, and these can be some of the scariest, because a wire that wasn't properly secured, or a connection that wasn't crimped tight, can work itself loose from road vibration over time, sometimes causing lights or outlets to fail, sometimes creating a real fire risk if it's chafing against something it shouldn't be touching. I've heard from more than a few of you over the years about mysterious electrical gremlins, things working fine one day and not the next. And a rushed wiring job during that boom period is very often the root cause, even if nobody at the dealership can immediately point to exactly what's wrong. Now, I want to talk about something that makes all of this worse than it would be with almost any other big purchase you'd make. And that's how little protection you actually have as an RV buyer compared to somebody buying a car. Most folks assume RVs come with the same kind of lemon law protection cars do, where if a vehicle has a serious defect that can't be fixed after a reasonable number of attempts, you're entitled to a replacement or a refund. The truth is a whole lot messier than that. Lemon laws vary wildly from state to state, and in a good number of states, RVs, especially the towable kind like travel trailers and fifth wheels, aren't covered by lemon laws at all, or are only covered in a limited way that makes them a whole lot harder to actually use than the protections you'd have buying a car, sometimes requiring a specific number of documented repair attempts within a narrow window of time before you're even eligible to pursue anything further. That means if you end up with a genuinely defective rig, your main recourse is usually working through the manufacturer's warranty process. And that process, especially at manufacturers who got overwhelmed by the sheer volume of warranty claims coming out of that rushed boom-era production, can mean months of waiting, parts back orders, and dealer service departments so backed up that scheduling a simple warranty repair can take weeks just to get on the calendar, let alone actually get the work completed and signed off. I want to tell you about a woman named Sandra, watches this channel regular, who reached out to me a while back with a story that stuck with me. Sandra and her husband had been planning their retirement trip for years, had a whole route mapped out through the national parks out west, and finally pulled the trigger on a brand new travel trailer in the fall of 2021. Right in the thick of that rushed production period we've been talking about. Though, of course, they had no way of knowing that at the time. They'd saved carefully, paid a good chunk of it in cash, and financed the rest with a plan to have it paid off well before they hit the road full-time. Within the first 3 months, they'd found a soft spot developing in the floor near the slide-out. Notice the bathroom door didn't close square anymore, even though it had when they bought it, and started hearing a rattle in the wall behind their bed that nobody at the dealership could ever quite pin down, no matter how many times Sandra described it over the phone. She told me she started keeping a running list on a notepad by the door, adding to it every time she noticed something new, and by the time she finally got somebody to take her seriously, that list had grown a lot longer than she ever expected it would. They filed warranty claims for all of it. The floor issue alone took nearly 4 months just to get scheduled for inspection, because the dealer's service department was buried under a backlog of other owners dealing with similar problems from that same production era, and every time Sandra called to check on the status, she got a different person telling her a different timeline. When the tech finally did get to it, he confirmed water had gotten in through a slide-out seal that hadn't been installed correctly, and by that point, the damage had spread further than it would have if it had been caught early. Meaning what could have been a simple seal replacement turned into a much bigger repair involving actual structural work to the floor itself. Sandra told me the whole experience left her and her husband feeling like they'd been sold a lemon dressed up to look like their retirement dream. And what hurt worse than the money, she said, was how long it took anybody to actually acknowledge there was a real problem instead of brushing off what she was telling them, making her feel at times like she was imagining things or being overly picky about a brand new purchase. She told me the trip out west finally happened, almost a full year later than planned, and even then she said she spent the whole first week half expecting something else to go wrong. I don't want to leave you with just the bad news today, though, because there's real, practical things you can do to protect yourself, whether you're shopping for a rig right now or trying to get ahead of problems on one you already own. First, if you're buying, do not skip or rush your pre-delivery inspection, and I mean really do it. Not just a quick walkthrough where the dealer points out the nice features and you nod along. Run every slide out and back multiple times, not just once, listening for grinding or uneven movement, and watch how it seats when it's fully retracted, checking that the seal makes solid contact all the way around, rather than gapping anywhere. Test every faucet, every appliance, every light and outlet, and don't just flip switches quickly. Actually run water long enough to check for leaks underneath. Actually let the fridge and the water heater cycle through a full run to make sure they're holding temperature the way they should. Open and close every cabinet and drawer, checking that they hang square and latch properly. And pull out drawers fully to check the slides underneath for smooth operation, rather than binding. Get up close to seams and seals and actually look at them instead of glancing past them from a few feet away. Run your finger along the caulking around windows and the roof edge if you can safely get up there, feeling for any gaps, any spots where the bead looks thin or uneven compared to the rest. Check underneath the rig too, not just the interior, looking at the underbelly for any sagging, any obvious gaps in the coverings, anything that looks like it was installed in a hurry rather than fitted with care. Bring a flashlight and actually get down and look. Rather than trusting that everything underneath is fine, just because you can't see a problem from standing height. A rushed PDI is exactly how folks end up driving off the lot, with problems that would have been obvious if anybody had taken the time to really check. And I'd rather you spend an extra hour at the dealership catching a problem before you sign than spend months afterward fighting to get that same problem acknowledged and fixed. I also want to encourage you to bring somebody along for this inspection if you can. Whether that's a friend who's handy, another RVer you trust, or in some cases a paid independent RV inspector who does this kind of thing professionally. A second set of eyes catches things you'll miss on your own, especially when you're excited about a new purchase, and your brain's naturally inclined to overlook small flaws in favor of focusing on everything that's exciting about the rig. Some buyers even negotiate a short shakedown period into their purchase agreement, camping close to home for a weekend before finalizing everything, specifically to catch problems that only show up once you've actually lived in the rig for a few days, rather than just walked through it on a lot. Second, look at the build date on your rig before you buy, which you can usually find on a data plate somewhere inside, often near the entry door or in a cabinet. Or ask your dealer to pull it for you if you can't find it. A rig built during the height of that pandemic rush, roughly late 2020 through 2022, deserves extra scrutiny. Not because every single unit from that period is bad. Plenty aren't. But because the odds of running into rushed workmanship go up during that window. And knowing that gives you a reason to inspect that much more carefully before you sign anything. There's an old piece of wisdom from the automobile world that applies just as well here. And it's worth understanding even though it's more of a general pattern than a hard rule you can count on every single time. Folks who've worked assembly lines for decades will tell you that quality tends to dip at the very start and the very end of a shift. When workers are either just getting warmed up or already thinking about getting home. And it tends to dip around holidays and long weekends too, when a plant's pushing to clear out a backlog before time off, or rushing to catch back up after it. I'm not telling you there's some magic formula where a rig built on a Tuesday afternoon is guaranteed better than one built on a Friday, because that's an oversimplification of a much messier reality. But the underlying principle holds up. Rushed conditions produce rushed work. Whether that rush comes from an entire industry drowning in orders for 2 straight years, or just from a single crew trying to hit a deadline before a long weekend. Knowing that pattern exists gives you one more reason to inspect thoroughly regardless of when your particular unit happened to roll off the line, rather than assuming a recent build date automatically means you're in the clear. Third, understand your warranty and your state's specific protections before you ever need them, not after. Read through what's actually covered, how many repair attempts you're entitled to before other options open up, and what your state does or doesn't offer in terms of lemon law coverage for RVs specifically. Knowing this ahead of time means you're not scrambling to figure it out while you're already frustrated and dealing with a real problem. And it means you can push back with actual knowledge if a dealer or manufacturer tries to slow walk a legitimate claim. And fourth, if you're already dealing with issues on a rig you own, document everything. Photos, dates, every phone call and every name of who you spoke with, every promise made and whether it was kept. Keep a written log the same way Sandra started doing on that notepad by her door, because memory alone won't hold up nearly as well as a clear paper trail once you're several months and several different service representatives into a drawn-out claim. A well-documented history of a problem and your attempts to get it fixed puts you in a far stronger position if you ever need to escalate a claim. Push for a resolution, or, in the worst cases, pursue whatever legal options your state actually does provide. I want to be fair here too, because I don't want you walking away from this video thinking every single RV built in the last few years is garbage, because that's simply not true. Plenty of manufacturers weathered that boom period better than others, largely depending on how disciplined they stayed about hiring and training even while demand was screaming at them to build faster. And plenty of individual units rolled off the line just fine even during the worst of the rush. Built by crews who took pride in their work regardless of the pressure coming down from above them. The industry as a whole has also been working to rebuild quality control processes now that demand has cooled back down to something more manageable. And a good number of manufacturers have publicly talked about investing back into training and inspection now that they're not drowning in backlogged orders the way they were a few years back. But I also don't want you walking away thinking this was just bad luck scattered randomly across a few unfortunate buyers. Because it wasn't. It was a predictable result of an industry that chose volume over craftsmanship during a period when they could sell literally anything they built, and the folks who paid the price for that choice were the buyers. Folks like Sandra. Folks like a lot of you watching this video right now, who trusted that a brand new rig with a manufacturer's warranty on it meant they were buying something built with care. The same trust folks have placed in this industry for generations. I want to hear from you on this one. Drop a comment down below and tell me if you've dealt with any of what we talked about today. Whether that's water intrusion, slide-out problems, electrical gremlins, or just a whole pile of small annoying defects that added up to a rig that never felt quite right from the day you drove it off the lot. Tell me how long it took to get taken seriously, and whether you ended up satisfied with how it was resolved. Because I think a lot of folks watching are still in the middle of fighting for a fix, and could use hearing that somebody else made it through the other side. And if you bought during that boom period and got lucky, if your rigs held up just fine, I want to hear that too. Because it's worth knowing this isn't universal, even if it's a whole lot more common than it ought to be, and it might ease some worry for folks out there who bought during that window and are bracing for problems that may never actually show up. Before I let you go, if you're shopping for a rig right now, take everything we talked about today seriously. Don't let the excitement of a new purchase rush you past a real inspection. And don't assume a manufacturer's warranty means the same level of protection you'd get buying a car, because as we talked about, it very often doesn't. And if you're already dealing with problems on a rig you bought during that rushed period, don't give up on getting it made right. Even if it feels like you're fighting an uphill battle against a dealer or manufacturer that keeps giving you the runaround. Document everything, know your rights in your state, and push for the resolution you're actually owed. Because you worked hard for this dream, and you deserve a rig that was built with the same care you put into earning the money to buy it. Nobody spends their retirement savings, or takes on a loan they'll be paying off for years, hoping to end up fighting a warranty department instead of making memories out on the road, and you shouldn't have to settle for anything less than a rig that actually lives up to what you were promised when you signed on the dotted line. I'm Hank Dawson, thank you kindly for listening to Roadside Wisdom, and I'll see you in the next one.